So this is Brenda Bruggeman, and it is Monday, August 3rd, and we're here at the end of the Broadville School of English's special summer writing experience where we all stayed home, safe in the middle of a pandemic summer, and met up together on Zoom, usually, and ongoing writing shared in a folder, and then we would meet and talk. And I'm here with Veronica Foster, who did an independent research project, so a much longer kind of paper and engagement and research thing. So I'm going to start, actually, Veronica, if I could let you introduce yourself and do the thing where you try to explain to someone who doesn't know anything about this project what it's about, like in a 2-minute spiel.
Okay, I will do my very best. So I'm Veronica Foster. I, in my non-breadloaf summer life, am a high school English teacher in Biddeford, Maine. And this summer I was writing about one documentary in particular called Alive Day Memories Home from Iraq, which features 10 interviews with young disabled veterans from the Iraq War. And I was really trying to trace some of the different ways that people were telling their stories and the way that the telling of those stories were inflected by gender. So I looked at some scholarship that already existed, most of it which was about male veterans, and then tried to think about the ways that the women in the film, both the veterans themselves and the caregivers that were sort of also in the film, were revising those sort of more traditional narratives.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought of that because every holiday and summer when I went back to Kansas with my grandmother, I had to explain to her over and over and over again what rhetoric was, because I had a PhD in rhetoric. And clearly I was not ever doing a good job because I had to keep explaining it. So I always ask people to do that. So kind of general question in this process of doing an independent research project, which lasts us, well, it's a year from when it's first proposed and that, and but coming down to the wire, you take a couple of things that you learned about yourself, you learned about writing.
Yeah.
That you learned about writing and that you learned about yourself as a writer.
So I think maybe to start with what I learned about myself as a writer, there's this Dorothy Parker quote that I love that's like, I hate writing, but I love having written, that I feel really called to. I like the process of writing, but it's something that I really have always done in community with other people. And so when I started the IRP, probably in like the last winter, and I started the reading, I was like, great, I can totally do this. I loved all the reading. I loved the research. I took a bazillion notes. It was great. And then I sat down to write, and I had not been able to talk about any of the reading with anyone. And I wasn't totally sure if I even had the contours of the field figured out. And I was like, I don't even know. And I think that was actually really helpful. I had never been asked to write something so long without an intervention from someone else before. And it was really hard. And I realized, I think, about myself that I don't always trust my own judgment in terms of how things should be structured or what information I should be including, but I did it. And that was really helpful to know that it was possible, because there was a point in January where I was like, there's just no way, right? I think about writing, I think that especially, so, this is a grad school writing assignment. I have taken all of my graduate school classes at the Breadloaf School of English. They've been wonderful, but they're designed for teachers. And so really I went from sort of undergrad writing into my teaching life, and I didn't have a ton of graduate writing experience. And so I think that I am still sort of struggling to trust that my ideas are worth highlighting, and not just relying so heavily on critics. Because I think that the project in undergrad often is can you can you apply this theoretical framework to this text we're reading in class in an interesting way? But not necessarily like, can you do something new with it? Or can you notice something that other folks haven't talked about before? So that is something I'm still figuring out, but has been really fun and interesting to sort of ask myself the question of like, what actually matters here and what do I care about here, and less what will the person that I'm writing for think or care about.
Yeah, thinking about the readers. And so then just the other general question I had is the way that, everybody's experience teaching and learning was truncated, spun, cleavage, lots of those verbs happened this year from March on forward. And of course, this was supposed to be the 100th year of the Breadloaf School of English, and massive celebrations were planned too. So that all went down, and we would have been finishing this IRP being able to like literally see each other from across campus or somewhere every day, and probably often have met in the barn as well, or other places on a porch somewhere up on the campus. And instead we went to this space. But why don't you, instead of like dwelling on the negative, like, so what were some of the things that worked about this experience of writing like this, continuing this summer, that worked for you?
Yeah. I think one thing is that actually the Zoom format requires more attention and like offers more focus than us being across from each other in the barn where there's 1,000 people and we know all of them and folks are getting coffee. And I think that there were more opportunities to like really just talk without having anything else to like do in my head, which I really appreciated. I think too that in some ways this is like a more accessible format for looking at writing, because we could pull up a document on the screen and look at particular language, or when you were like, oh, like you should read this article, and then you were able to go find it for me and then send it to me in that moment. I love Breadloaf, but I think that we reject technology in a way that feels really like fulfilling and wonderful, but also makes it hard sometimes to remember exactly what happened in conversations. And this format actually made that process of collaboration a little bit easier for me.
Yeah. Because I think I will agree with you here. Like I learned that going forward, even returning up to Breadloaf, and what ways I could create conversations if we're going to talk about writing, or instead of just sitting across the chairs from each other, but we can both have our screens open and be on the writing itself. So being able to highlight, like I'm looking at this sentence now and highlighting. But while technology is intervening, it becomes a little more textually based again too. Less. There's talk, but it's less about the talk. I would agree with you. So I have been very pleasantly surprised about how well this worked for the others. So the two teaching and writing groups, it worked out really well for those groups.
Great.
Yeah. And they produced a ton. And one group knew each other really well from class last year, and the other group were pretty different alums and one who'd even graduated. They didn't know each other at all, and they still worked really well together. Yeah, that made a lot of good energy. So I think that is there any question you want to be asked?
I don't know if there is. One thing that I've been trying to, I was asked recently, because I'm part of the Breadloaf Teacher Network, we have our little like one-on-one. So I had a one-on-one interview with Tom McKenna, and he asked about my IRP, and then like whether something from my IRP was going to end up in the classroom, which was such an interesting question, because I was like, I don't know if the content or this documentary is going to maybe end up in my classroom, but certainly I do feel like my ways of reading and thinking are really different now, both because of the content, both because I feel like there were just some things that I had never thought about in relation to disability that I can't unknow now. I think, the same way that we learn about gender or race or class, obviously, right, that I like had this like moment of awakening. It was like, oh my
Yeah.
God. Even to the amount that I still don't know, like at least
Yeah.
I know all those, that there is so much still to learn now, and I didn't know that before. But also about like writing. I think it was really helpful as a teacher of high school writing to be in a place where I struggled sometimes and was like confused about what to do, and thinking about sort of what were my strategies for moving through those challenges. And like what help did I need, or like what questions did I find myself returning to. So I think even the process of writing something so long without like the format or structure of a class was really helpful for me as a teacher.
Yeah. I just started those down, but about disability, the frame. I was struck by that in your paper. I'll say is how much you had been able to articulate how the narrative is always already written, and so when people become disabled, they are entering into a narrative that is already so prevalent and pervasive. It's already inside our skins, and we don't even realize that. And then become disabled, and so it's not us telling the story, but the story's already been told, and the real challenge becomes how to tell it a different way. And the voice is heard, and then writing. I think there's a third thing though. I think that would transfer to the classroom how to read a film.
No, you're super right.
Yeah, especially documentary. But all film too. How the choices that any filmmaker makes, and putting narratives and structuring them together, and what they have to say to each other.
That's a really good point. I am going back to school in a month.
I'll
be in the building, which is interesting, but I have been trying to think about, it's really hard for me to conceive of a classroom where all of my students are in rows and 6 feet apart from each other, and I can't have group work happening, or I can't have my partner stuff happening. But I've never like taught, I've used films in class, but I've never maybe taught a film in the same way that I would teach a piece of writing, but it does seem like that might be something more engaging given the other sort of strictures present in class.
It's true. It can be very hard to get students to talk about a film afterwards, because and that's even true in adult classrooms. You watch a film and then you just kind of want to like, no, just leave now. But there are techniques, even the way that you wrote this paper too, is that breaking them up in little pieces. So you would only let them watch, 10, 15 minutes of the opening of a film first, and then cut it off and save the rest. For later, and chunk it out, so they have ways of engaging, particularly leaning forward into it instead of letting the narrative control. But panning out the big picture of the film, and then also looking down close at scenes can be very effective, and you certainly did that work in this paper too. I mean, it was the last pass through that you went in really close to scenes and actually quoted direct lines from scenes that are generally referencing. Okay. Thank you so much for talking. I'm going to turn